In the next hour, my plan is to help you break down the ways that over 300 youth have told us they would like to be ministered to. Now, I know that you have two primary questions about this whole thing. Who are you? And how did you get this information? Well, let me answer the first one first. My name is McLaughlin. If you're a youth minister, you've probably gotten an email from me. I'm the founder of Torchbearer Ministries. We are the fastest growing youth ministry resource development company in the world. Our tools and our model are helping parishes in over 42 dioceses engage and connect teens and help them make the faith into a lifestyle. You're going to hear that phrase quite often, so get used to it. Our mission as a company is to engage teens with Christ and his church in a way that allows for them to become lifelong Catholics. We recognize the fact that what we're doing now doesn't work. If it was working, it means that all the numbers of people leaving the faith would be going down. So we recognize that we need a change, and we're trying to help lead that change. We don't believe that we are, grab a seat, absolutely. We don't believe that we're the sole change, but we know that we can start to create the change. Find seats, guys. Perfect. Awesome. And if you aren't sure if I'm actually legit, this is my email responses from people who started just this last week. We're legitimate. We actually work in parishes. I didn't just write these. Notice some of the themes here. Teens were disappointed when they said the time was up to keep talking about topics. Pastors saying that our training was worth their time. Teens having a blast picking out topics. We're going to go into a lot more of that in detail. But yes, I'm legit. Also, I've been on international television on EWTN to discuss work I've done with youth. So yeah, if my face my face minus beard, the baby face version of me, can you tell why I grew this? Next to Raymond Arroyo doesn't spark confidence, I don't know what will. So now where's this data coming from? So at NCYC, the National Catholic Youth Conference 2022 in Long Beach. I live right close to it. So I was like, let's just go. We did a booth just like we did here. We put up a giant sign. Here's our cute little booth. We put up that sign. See what it says at the top? What do you want from youth group? And we got over 300 teens to give us what they want to do. And what we did was we took this information and we brought it into the top 7 things that they were most interested in, the top 7 categories of what teens are curious. Now, the great thing is that this is going to be relevant no matter your size, demographic, budget, number of volunteers, traditional or charismatic. It doesn't really matter because this is a youth conference of teens from across the country. And so the information that you're going to get is going to be relevant no matter who you are. I know that there's a lot of diversity in this diocese. And I can tell you, even if you're a bilingual, multilingual parish, we have parishes that are doing that style. And so this is something that teens are looking for across the board, no matter who they are. Also, in this year alone, I've talked with over 700 youth ministers. And if you like math, that is about 2 to 3 per day, every single day. I have sent about 90,000 emails by hand this year alone, just to connect with youth ministers and see how we can help. Yes, my fingers are tired. And they're repeating a lot of what we're going to talk about. So it's not just, that was 2022. Trust me, this is the same thing. And even if you talk to people who are doing adult ministry, middle school ministry, young adult ministry, the framework of what we're going to talk about is the same because as a church, we are longing for the same things. And so no matter who you are, this is going to be super, super, super relevant, no matter where you work. If you're a volunteer, if you're a catechist, if you're a director of religious education, doesn't matter. We have parishes using some of our tools even as DREs for adult ministry. So this works. So I don't like just saying things because then it's like, you said words to me. Great, I'm going to make 3 promises that I want you to hold me to. Fair enough? 3 promises are, you'll know what teens are looking for and connecting with. Second, you'll understand how these needs are being met successfully in parishes. And then finally, I'm not going to try to sell you anything. If you want to know what we do, you want to buy our stuff, come chat with me at the booth. I'd love to. No one's been chatting with me. So come over, say hi. We'll see what we can do in your diocese, in your parish. We good on this? Sound good? Wonderful. And we'll have time for questions at the end, a few, if I can be quick. If not, we'll go deep. All right, let's get started. Number 7, food, with 7 notes. I know, shocking, right? Well, what does this mean? This could just be hungry teen boys, but we know that food helps people draw a closer connection together. Every sort of parish ministerial program says start with food because when we break bread together, just like Christ did, we share a commonality. We need some sort of thing that introduces us to each other. And food is a great way to do that. It stretches across multicultural, multilingual. If we have food together, we know what we're doing. So how are youth ministers responding? Well, it's really simple. You don't have to order Domino's pizza, even if they were founded by a Catholic, but you at least have to have something for them to snack on. All right, number 6, music. What does this mean? Well, some people were specifically referencing praise and worship. In that we were at a youth conference, they had a great worship band, praise and worship adoration, right? Now, here's the thing. What they meant was they want something that's engaging with them. For example, Abby said, I like how I'm able to really get into it here, it being the faith. She was able to connect in a really engaging way. And youth ministers are responding in a really interesting way, because don't think that this is saying that we need to be more charismatic as a faith, right? A lot of times it says praise and worship is the answer because we want teens to connect more with the faith, and we see that they have a physical reaction when they're having praise and worship, right? The problem is that we're using that as a crutch, not as a tool. Because then we say, but we're doing praise and worship, why aren't teens showing up? Why aren't they connecting? We're singing Oceans for 9 minutes, and they still don't fall in love with Christ. What are we doing wrong here? So instead, what we need to, I just saw a lot of nod heads, wow. What we need to do is re-examining if what we're doing is actually connecting with the teens we're ministering to. We need to make sure that we're making it matter to them, because if we don't, why would they care? If it's not relevant in their life, it doesn't matter. And I will talk about that for like 20 minutes later on, so don't worry. Number 5, drawing closer to God. This one is very interesting. 8 teens use the exact words, grow closer. 5 teens were looking for concrete things to learn. They said prayer, Bible studies, deep conversation, etc. 7 teens mentioned learning about the faith as well as something else. So what they were saying was they want something as well as growing closer with God. They want a community that grows closer with God. They want food that grows closer, whatever, right? So how are great youth ministers responding? It's about recognizing the longing for how. Here's the thing. There are only 3 elements to a life of faith. We're a Catholic church, right? Everybody here is Catholic, I hope, or at least works in a Catholic church. Good, I'm at the right conference. I'm glad that got a laugh. We get confused. We're like, the Bible is big, the Catechism is massive, the Summa Theologica, I don't even touch anymore. There's so much to the faith. What do we do? If we break every aspect of the faith down, it only comes down to 3 things. What, which is the theology of the faith. This is the knowledge that we have. Who is God? In the understanding of what He is, not as the person of God. That is the why. Now notice, there's a really interesting distinction between these 2 things. What is knowledge-based and why is connection-based? Here's the interesting thing. When we focus in on knowledge base, we're losing out on the personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And when we focus on the personal relationship with Jesus Christ, we miss out on the 2,000 years of knowledge that the church has, which is such a unique point of what the Catholic faith is. Every other Christian, non-denominational, whoever you want to say, their focus is on the why. They bring people in because they say, God loves you and has a personal relationship with you. This is important. But we can't beat them in that mission because we don't have they're going to beat us in their sermons. Their worship band is better and they have a smoke machine. How are we going to compete? Genuinely. Because if we do that much incense, we're all knocked on the ground. Let's be honest, guys. Come on. So we need to figure out, how do we bridge the knowledge that we have as a faith with the understanding of the personal relationship with Jesus Christ in the fullness of the faith that the Catholic Church has? And that comes down to the 3rd element, which is how. This is what everyone is missing right now in ministry, is the application and the practicality. Because notice, what the teens said they wanted is to draw closer to God. They didn't want to know more about Him. They didn't want to be connected with Him. They wanted to go closer. Right? If I step closer to Ruth here, yes. If I step closer to Ruth here, I did an action. I stepped. I did a verb, right? What teens want to do is know how to take that step. They want to know what the application is. They want to know what is the how. Because here's the thing. This is what I'm hearing every day. You love God, so you should pray. Well, how do I pray? There's a million ways to do it, right? You should discern the priesthood. How do I discern marriage or the priesthood? Share the faith with your friends. How do I do that? Do I just give them the knowledge? Do I share the personal relationship with Jesus Christ? What do I do? And that's what we're missing. So when we're talking about drawing closer to Christ, what we need to talk about is focusing on that which is practical to the teen. It's not about here is about prayer. It's here is different ways in which you can pray. The Rosary, Lectio Divina, other styles of spiritual reading, Ignatian charism, Joseph charism, Dominican charism, right? Carmelite, Benedictine. There's all these different styles of the faith. Our goal is to show here's a practical way that you in your daily life can live this out. This is why constantly we see when teens come off of a retreat and we're like, you're awesome, you got the Jesus high, you're ready to go, right? And then 2 weeks later, they're back to what they were doing. And they're still not volunteering, they're still not connecting. It's because we're not giving them an application in their daily life. Because if we make the faith practical, they're going to care. So this is what we're missing. And it feels like I'm hounding on this. It's because if they know how to make it a part of their life and it makes sense, that is something they are longing for. And that's a way that we can get them more engaged. We're talking about engagement and connection, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. Number 4, activities. Now, before you go pull out AI or ChatGPT or anything to help you make a bunch of icebreakers, only 2 teens mentioned games, soccer and football. And notice, how many notes did we have? 34. So what were the 32 other teens asking for? I'm going to stand on this side of the podium. Activities mean 2 things. Trips, retreats, and conferences. Duh, we knew this. And help understanding the lessons. Now, I want to be very, very particular about this. There are 4 quotes that explain specifically, because we can do this, and you're like, I'm doing that, yeah. We're doing it wrong 9 times out of 10. So let me explain what this actually means through the words of teens. Catherine said, I drive an hour to youth group because there aren't any Catholics in my school, and I need to not feel alone. I know. Good on Catherine. She has more faith than most of us do. She's willing to make that effort. But notice, her activity is she wants to be there in a place where that community is. So for her, the activity is just being there with people who are like-minded. So that's the first quote. Matt said, I want to learn, but don't make me feel like a dumb kid. Yeah. During COVID, there were middle schoolers who were learning how to code inside of Minecraft, yes, the video game, and building their own computers that could connect to their home internet that could order them a pizza. I guarantee they can know about basic moral philosophy and theology. We shouldn't treat the faith as if they are too stupid to understand it. They can understand the faith. The number 1 highest searched query by 13 to 18-year-olds over the last 2 years. Don't ask me why Google's tracking this. I don't work for them. The number 1 search query was about neuroscience. It was about, how does our brain work? Because they want to know, is social media actually killing my brain cells? What is the way that I should live? If you look at trends, Snapchat and Instagram are terrified right now because the core demographic that is considered most valuable, 13 to 18-year-olds, because they're the most malleable for advertisements, are fleeing because they're realizing that it does not work for personal connection. Are we feeling, teens? We're on the same page? It's not the same, right? So, were you sleeping? I believe you. Quote number 4, Allison said, we talk a lot about helping others, but we don't ever do it. She's like, we did 6 months on talking about the corporal works of mercy, and we never went to feed the homeless. Why should we? I just saw mouths drop. Yeah. Why should they feel like the faith matters if we're not even doing what we say we should do? So this is what we're talking about with activities. It's not just helping them understand the faith or connect with it. It's about putting it into practice. And finally, this is probably one of the most heartbreaking ones for me. The most heartbreaking is the next one. Alex, he was this big guy. Same conference, right? This is where I'm getting all the quotes. He was this big, like, linebacker-looking kid, which is funny because he was from Texas and he had a pink sparkly cowboy hat on. So it was very interesting to talk with him. But he wrote on his sheet, he's like, I don't want to be a dumb kid. I don't need to play games. And I was like, that feels like a very intense feeling. Why do you feel that way? He said, okay, so we played a game as an icebreaker where we were given a 10-pound bag of ice and told us to hold it for as long as we can. Have you guys maybe heard of this activity before? Good. Because his response, they got to the end of the night, right, when they were holding it, and they said, when you let go of the ice bag, it's a representation of your suffering. When you let go of your suffering, you experience the warmth and the connection and the lightness that comes with Jesus Christ and his saving grace, right? The problem is, he told me, my dog had just died 2 days before. I don't need them to make a game to make me understand what suffering is. I'm like tearing up thinking about that. He felt so demeaned because of the fact that we thought, you don't know suffering, you don't know love, you don't understand loss. So when we're doing things, we cannot make teens feel like, you're dumb, let me dumb it down for you. They want the fullness and the truth of the faith. And they want activities that are reflecting and connecting them with that thing. So how are youth ministers responding? Whew, we're getting intense here. Well, give other opportunities for connecting with others. Even if you just connect with the next parish over and say, yo, let's all do a bonfire night. Let's do a retreat together, confirmation or otherwise, right? That shows the teens. It's not just your small groups, not just the large group. It's the parish ministry. It's the parish as a whole. Events like this are awesome because teens can connect with other teens, people who are like-minded to them. So that connection that they're making, that's the kind of activity they want. They also want genuine activities, that help teens connect with, that help them connect with the topics. Something that actually, we're talking about five proofs of God's existence. Okay, a little bit heady. The paperclip example, well, eventually you have to get to the final paperclip, and that paperclip is God. I'm not going to go into in depth with that. That's a whole, we can go off for hours on that. That's a kind of activity. It's putting it into practice for them. It's showing a physical example for them. And then finally, giving options for actively engaging within the church. And I'm not saying the church as a building, I'm saying the church as a whole. If teens knew that they could be lectors or Eucharist ministers or ushers, sometimes, yeah, they don't want to do it. But that teen might really want to serve at a food kitchen. And your parish has one and they don't even know it. So figure out with your parish, how can we make sure that it is actively a way for teens to be able to connect with this? Number 3, learning. If you guys thought that that was intense, let's get into this. How do teens want to learn? Well, first, help with life. We're going to get some more quotes. This is another one of the most heartbreaking ones. This guy came up to us. There's no name because I didn't want to put his name because this is really personal. He said, my best friend, his parents are going through a divorce. He's not Catholic. But I'm trying to be there for him, and it's really, really hard because I don't even know how. And it's affecting me because I'm feeling, as a friend, when I'm talking to him, I'm feeling that pain. So I wish that people told me how I could use the faith to deal with it, both to help him and to help myself. So they're learning, they want to know, how can I get help with life? They want to apply the faith. We're back to that how again. Diversity and inclusion. This is not what you think it's going to be. If the church believes everything they say is true, then they shouldn't be worried about someone challenging what they believe. This kid was 14. He was like, I wanted to ask a question about something, and they said, we can't talk about that. Obviously, age appropriateness is very important. Not going to shy away from that. We shouldn't be talking to 8th graders about certain things. Duh. And there are aspects of how we can talk about things that make sense within the context of who someone is. But when we do this, and we say, sorry, we're not talking about that tonight. Or we're saying, you know what, we're never going to cover that because we're in such a strict framework and format that we're just doing this thing. And we're never going to connect with what you're looking for. It feels like we're only going to teach you this part of the faith because we're scared to teach you the other parts. And teens want to know, if you keep hearing this over and over again, they want to know the answer. They want to know the fullness of truth. So they want diversity. They want to know, how does this apply to my life? What is the church's thoughts on immigration? What's the church's relationship to government? What's our role in media? They want to know these practical questions. So they want diversity and inclusion. They want to be allowed to ask these questions, and they want diversity of thought. They want to be challenged, and they want to be allowed to say things that are challenging, that feel challenging. They want to quiz the church. They want to see if the church is wrong. The nice thing is we don't have to worry about it because the church literally has answers to everything. They also want to be taken seriously when they're learning. We need kids no more. We need serious topics. This is another guy with a pink sparkly cowboy hat. Also, not being forced to believe something. This is probably the most heartfelt story for me. We have this big banner, right? And we're at a youth conference. So we kind of understand everyone's pretty Catholic there, right? Just as Catholic as the Pope. And Emily comes up to me, hands me a sticky note. And she says, here's my answer. What do you want from youth group? Here's my answer. Hands it to me. I'm like, okay. I flip it over. It says pro-choice. I'm like, okay, you know what? One of my core beliefs is that there are no wrong answers, only wrong conclusions. Let's engage in conversation and see why. After 45 seconds of conversation, just asked her one question, she talked for 45 seconds. I found out that she didn't even know what abortion was, and she didn't even care. Her problem was that someone said, you have to go pray with us at the abortion clinic because that's what we do. Because Catholics have to be pro-choice. It is true that the Catholic Church's position on abortion is unchanging because it comes from a position of we defend life. And life starts at conception. That's the Church's opinion. Her problem was with people telling her, this is what you need to believe. It wasn't even, because you hear this and you think pro-choice, you're thinking my body, my choice. You're thinking bodily autonomy. She didn't even know those words. She didn't even have that opinion. Her problem was that someone told her, you have to do this thing. And she was so angry about that she was willing to come up to someone at a conference and say, this is my thing. I'm willing to pick a fight about it. People only fight when something is important to them. And so if the thing that was important to her wasn't even abortion, it could have been a million things. Could have been women priests. It could have been, immigration. It could have been God's love. It could have been any number of things. Immeasurable. Her problem is that someone told her, here's what you have to do, instead of letting her discover it for herself. So that's how teens want to learn. How are youth ministers responding? So this is the traditional mindset. I'm sure you guys have seen this. This is from Sherry Weddell's 2008 book, Forming Intentional Disciples. Show of hands, has anybody read this book? Okay, awesome. This is the framework that people have been using for creating ministry and ministry models for the last almost 2 decades. Basically, the way it works is it starts with the idea of initial trust. You need to have trust in the person, right? Then you have to have spiritual curiosity. You have to be curious about specifically God as a relationship, as someone who died for you in a relationship with you in the form of Jesus Christ. Then you have openness to more, then you're seeking more, and then you're able to be an intentional disciple who goes out. This is the modern terminology that everyone in the faith is using. You saw there's a number of talks that are focused on this idea of missionary discipleship, intentional discipleship. This is the framework, and this works really well on a very specific basis. This works well when you're doing one-on-one with someone, or when you're in a fixed format of, let's say, OCIA or RCIA. This works really well because you're interested already, you already have the curiosity, you want to start the process, and you're open, you already want to start the process of seeking. So this works in that model. The problem is, okay, let's say all of you guys are teens, except for the teens, you guys don't have to pretend. Let's say I split this room into one half and this room into another, right? Y'all are 9th graders, you guys are 10th graders. 10th graders, we just went on an amazing student build retreat last year. You guys are super on fire and you're ready to connect more with Christ. Awesome. 9th graders, you're not even close to being there yet. We gotta wait a year until we get to a next retreat and we have that experience, right? If we're looking at this model, but all of you are in my small group, all of you are in my youth group, and we meet for an hour on Sundays. With this model, I can't serve any of you because we need to get all of you guys up to speed. And then I wonder why you guys leave the church after confirmation. I'm going to lose you guys because we have to get everyone on the first ladder before we go to the second ladder. We need to build the foundation. This is different. What we do with this is we say there are only 4 core aspects to the faith when you break it down. There is recognition of who God is, which is faith and belief, for lack of better terms. There is an understanding of how God designed the whole world to be, which is a worldview. Nature is meant to run like this. Then there's spirituality, which are actions that bring us closer in alignment with who God is. And then there's service, which is actions that bring ourselves and the world closer to the design of how God meant it. Let me give you some examples. This is spiritual reading, learning more about God. This is prayer, or learning more about charisms, or connecting more. This is understanding how the church applied Catholic social teaching. And this, volunteering or learning how to get rid of sin in your life. Because we shouldn't just stick with our sin, we should get rid of it. We should figure out how can we move past it. We should grow in virtue. If you're doing these things, our core belief as a company is that if you do this, you're a saint. That's all a saint was. It was someone who knew who God was, genuinely knew who God was and the person of Christ. They understood how the world was meant to work even smallly, right? And they understood the spirituality. They were always trying to grow closer to God, and they were always trying to bring the world closer to Him. Notice the word try there. It's not that you have to be doing everything, it's that you're trying on each step of the way. You're improving, you're growing closer with each step. That's all a saint was. And yes, I just broke down sainthood into a chart. That's it. We want teens to be saints. I don't want them to be disciples. I want them to be Catholics for the rest of their life. And so if we want them to be saints, and this is what a saint is, then we draw this circle around it, and that's curiosity. If a saint comes into your, hopefully a saint comes into your ministry. If a teen comes into your ministry and they say, I want to learn about abortion, wonderful. We introduce them right into that. If I pull this room and I say, what do you guys most want to talk about? And I show you a list of topics, and you guys say, I want to talk about where's God when I'm suffering. I want to talk about the church and government. I want to talk about Catholics, or I want to talk about how we do things, right? I want to go on trips, volunteering, and I want to understand who is God as a father. What should I do as a youth minister? I should probably tackle those conversations. Because if you're curious about something, I want to plug you in. Because then guess what's going to happen? You're going to be curious about something else. Then that's going to lead to something else. And then that's going to lead to something else. And that's what the crazy thing about the church is, and why at the beginning I said it's so confusing. Because we go from one tangent to another, to another, to another, to another, but we should use that to our advantage. Because if we answer one question, they say, but what about? And then what about that? And then what about that? And then what about that? And if we answer their question enough, They're going to want to follow the church's teaching, not because of the knowledge they gain, but because it has now mattered and been practical in their life. Because if you do something over and over, let's say you're trying to lose weight, let's say, right? If you go to the gym once a week, nothing's going to happen. It might be really small. If you go to the gym every single day and you eat better, etc., you are probably going to lose weight, right? Like, even if we don't like that that's the answer, obviously there are exceptions to the rule, but that's probably going to work for 9 out of 10 people. In the same way, it's not about the fact that you know that you should be eating weight, it's about doing the thing. And if I tell you, look man, try this, and it works, and you say, well, what about this? And I say this. And you say, but what about the Twinkies? And I say, no. And you say, but what about weights? I'm saying, go this way. And you're like, but what about cardio? And I say, go this way. You're going to hold me up as an authority figure because I'm answering questions to everything you have. I'm making it real and saying, oh yeah, so for that you want to do this. And you say, what about this? I say this. That's what this is, but about the faith. You say, where's God when I'm suffering? You say, who is God as a father? You say, what about abortion? You say, what about immigration? You say, how do I pray? You say, how do I read the Bible? At that point, they're like, well, shoot, I might as well be Catholic now. This just makes sense. Number 2, atmosphere. Now, before you think this is a youth room, conversations were way more matter-of-fact. It was much more specific. They said they wanted to just feel excited to come and welcomed when they're there. That's it. That's all they wanted. And this was 72 teens who just said, I just want to come, show up, feel invited, and feel welcomed. That's it. That's all I want. So, in response, how are great youth ministers responding? And I'm not saying this as like well, what should you do? I'm saying this is what I've seen. You need to identify superficial kindness versus genuine welcomeness. That's the difference. Now, in the faith, it becomes, especially in youth ministry, there's almost like an aesthetic to it, right? It's like you're wearing Jesus tee. If you're a girl, you're wearing a oversized Jesus tee with a scrunchie around it to tie it in tight, and then a maxi skirt and some like Chacos or Crocs, right? And for a guy, it's like I got a big beard and like a huge Jesus necklace. The faith isn't an aesthetic, though. It's a lifestyle. And that's what it means to be genuine. Because genuineness means being ourselves. And we talk about this, being genuine with the teens, meeting them where they're at, being real. But what we're doing is we're being kind. We're being nice. We're being welcoming. We're like, oh, well, every youth minister that I've seen, every person at a youth talk, every person gives is loud and exuberant. They're all theater kids. You're like, I'm not. I'm 64. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. So I can't just guess will never succeed in ministry. Here's the problem. You're forgetting one very, very, very crucial thing. We don't say that Saint Saul to Paul, Christian killer one, Paul, him, we don't say that he's better than Thomas Aquinas because one was a convert and one was a cradle Catholic. And we don't say that Thomas Aquinas was better than St. Martin de Porres because one wrote a bunch of books and prayers and literally saw the face of God and was willing to burn all his writing, and the other one was a porter at a monastery. Wasn't even a monk. He just swept up. And when someone said, I'd like to see the monk, he came, he brought them up. And we don't say that Martin de Porres is greater than Pier Giorgio Frassati, because one worked with the religious community, and one was just a dude in Italy, just bringing poor people medicine when they needed it, caring for people when he saw a need. We say that every single one of those people is a saint, right? So then why can't you be a saint, and 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 you all be different saints? There's no reason not to. As a church, this is one of the coolest things about the Catholic Church. We are all so diverse. We are able to be truly unique in each of our individual things. That's why we ask someone, what is your confirmation saint? Who is the saint that you want to emulate? My confirmation saint is Pope John Paul II. I got to meet him. Bragging for a second, hold on here. A year and a week before he died, his last celebrated Easter Mass, I was in Rome. Yes, I was like 8 years old. We're moving past that. And I remember him driving past on the Pope Mobile, and he was old. But there's only 2 moments in my life when actually 3 moments in my life when I've recognized that someone is holy. Like you can feel grace pouring off of him. And that was one of those moments. And as I grew up and I learned more about the new evangelization and his work, and I was like, shoot, I want to emulate you, man. That's what the saints are. That's what he's longing for. They want to have, I want to be this kind of a saint, right? I want to be like Joan of Arc. No, I want to be like St. Therese the Little Flower. Neither is wrong. So we need to be genuine. Because the you that you are, the saint that you could be, is the saint that they might respond to. If you're like, I'm quieter, some kids are quiet. I'm louder, theater kids are a brand. This is how it works. You need to just be yourself. And if you feel like, well, I have to be a certain way to be a youth minister, you do not. If I feel like I need to be a certain way to be a catechist, you do not. If you feel like I need knowledge, you don't even need that. And we'll go over that in a second. Anyone want to guess what the number one thing teens want is?
To be accepted?
Close.
To be heard.
To be heard. Close. Same thing that every single one of you really want right now.
To be loved? Community.
How many times a day do you say, yeah, I wish I had more of this? Out of 300 teens, 94 said that this is what they want. Almost a third, 30% of teens say they want a community. Now, what do these mean? Well, let me go into really specifics on what those 94 meant. 55 were just said community. If you go over on our board right now, there's about 5 or 6 that just say community. 13 mentions were of growing in the faith with others. They said, I want to go closer to God, but I want to do it with a group. I don't want to do it by myself because I feel lonely. 10 notes were just about meeting new people. 11 notes were on wanting a larger youth group. I'm sure you guys want that too. And 5 mentions were on having a support group. They wanted people who they can connect with. Like Emily, who said, no one in my school is Catholic, so I have to drive an hour. Each answer was very different, but each conversation that I had with these teens had a desire for youth group to be a place where they could connect and grow with others. Youth ministry looks really different. Some of you have a youth room, some of you have a parish hall, some of you meet on the front steps, except in the winter, in which you don't have youth group. Youth ministers respond to this in a really particular way, and we're going to really hammer down on this because this is the number one thing that teens are looking for. We need to reevaluate what our role is. Show of hands again, who here is like a youth leader at the parish? Like that's your main responsibility? Okay. Who here is just like a catechist or just a volunteer? Perfect. Okay. Your role, this is going to apply to both of you. Because the role of what we are is not a teacher, a saint, a mentor, an example, none of that. It's explained by this quote by Marcus Collins. And if you probably don't know who he is, he's the digital marketing strategist for this up-and-coming pop singer. You might have heard of her. Her name's Beyonce. So he knows how, if you're a Beyonce fan, it's like Swifties, Beyonce fan, like right next to each other. They are diehards. And he said, you cannot build community, you can only facilitate it. He actually said this within the context of sharing the gospel. Because a lot of times what we feel like is that when we build community, our goal is to build something that gives them the right answer. It's on catechesis. We are catechists. We give them the knowledge, right? That's our job, is to teach them. The problem is you can't forcefully grow a community. There's no way to do it. Like there's literally, we could shove you guys in a room together and then be like, community eyes. Never going to happen, right? You can only facilitate a community. You can only create an environment in which it's going to happen. The problem is, okay, but then what do we do? We got all the teens here. We got pizza. What do we do? What's our role? If we want to know our role, we have to know our goal. That rhymed. Ooh, I liked that. And our goal is not in teens knowing the correct answer. The goal of what we're trying to do is taking them on the journey of discovering the answer. If we just tell them the answer, it's not going to matter. Otherwise, we could just hand everybody theology of the body and the Bible and the catechism, and we'd be done. It'd make our jobs a lot easier, wouldn't it? Nothing would happen. If we're watching, I'm sure everyone here has seen Lord of the Rings because it's basically a Catholic requirement at this point. If he gets the ring and then 10 minutes later he drops it into the volcano, we saw none of the journey. It would be a lot easier to watch, but there would be no growth. Growth happens when a journey occurs. Think about your favorite book, your favorite movie. What we love is the journey the hero goes on. My wife is a writer. This is what she talks about all the time, is that the hardest part of writing something is making a journey that someone cares about. So what we need to do is we need to take teens on a journey. As an example to further prove this point, this is a wooden sailing ship. I'm sure you guys don't see many of these around here. This is the Susan Constant out of Jamestown, Virginia. I used to work on this ship. Don't ask. I will not elaborate. Yes, I will. I would dress up. I was a costumed interpreter. So imagine me in like long blue pants with a super long V-neck, like a white linen shirt and like a blue vest with a funny Bo Peep hat. That was exactly how I was on the brochures for this thing all over Virginia. That's why I moved to California. Don't ask. The whole story. Anyways. So this is the Susan Constant. Basically what we would do is people would come, we'd be sitting in the museum, but also sail, but mostly we would sit in the museum, and parents, families, school groups would come up and they wanted to learn. We called it living history. They would come up and we'd be like, hey, here's how you use ropes to load cargo onto it, and here's the physics behind it, right? Here's like how you would load in gunpowder to launch a cannonball or a gun or whatever. Here's how you can use very complex mathematics to determine, I started here and I went this far this direction, and this long in this speed, and this long in this, and so I should be here on the map. Long story short, I had like 17 binders on my first day of knowledge. Because we also had to know, okay, the Jamestown voyage, because it was about the Jamestown trip. So I had to know about Pocahontas. I had to know about the Disney movies wrong. Again, don't get me started. Lots of information. It almost felt like being Catholic. I was drowning. But fortunately, my boss said something that quite literally changed my life. It's one of the resonating factors of everything I've thought about. He was this big guy. His name was Don. He's a former aircraft crew chief. So his whole thing was making sure that people knew how to correctly get the giant planes onto the ship landing correctly. Big beard, big body, big personality. He spoke Dutch. This guy was awesome. This is what he told me on the first day, because he could see that as a 15-year-old, I was terrified. I was like, you just gave me, what am I supposed to, huh? He said, Connor, no one's going to remember how you teach them how to sail a ship. But they will always remember the feeling of when you give them a rope and they pull it, and they see the sail unfurl, and they hear the wind start to catch against it, and they feel the ship pulling against the ropes. That is what they're going to remember for the rest of their life. I could do the exact same thing with you guys. I could teach you all of this stuff, but if we had enough time and we met in a small group, you would feel the connection. It's not about the knowledge. It's not about the what is it. It's about the journey of connecting it for yourself. In sales, we always say that the only words people don't disagree with is the words out of their own mouth, because we already believe it. It's about creating a synapse connection in our brains where they go, oh, so that means that. And more importantly, that connection isn't just in the brain, it's between the head and the heart, because that's really what the longest journey in life is. And so if a teen is wondering, why did my uncle die of COVID? If they're wondering, why does Jesus love me in particular? I know why he loves us, but why does he love me? If they're wondering, can I still talk to my friend who's gay? He says I can't because I'm Catholic. If they're wondering, why does God allow suffering in my life? Like what Ethan said about his dog dying. If they're wondering even, how do I pray? How do I start reading scripture? Anything. Our goal and our role is to give them a space and give them the tools to find an answer. Our goal is to ask them the questions that take them on the journey of finding the answer for themselves. Because when they find it for themselves, it is real. It is powerful. And you're not just giving them the information. It has now become a journey as a part of their lifestyle that they've taken into every aspect of who they are. It becomes a core part of their identity. And let me tell you right now, it's a lot easier to let the Holy Spirit lead them to where he's calling than to try to guess for yourself. If they say, my question is about this, we should say, then let's figure out the answer. If they say, I want to know how to read scripture, let's crack that bad boy open. If they say, I want to know why God let this thing happen to me, I want to know why I should believe this. Our job is not to stray away and say, no, we can't talk about that. Oh, we're talking about it next week. Obviously, there's a format, there's a framework. Come talk to me later. We can talk about that in detail. But if we're just asking, what are great youth ministers doing? They're doing this. They're letting the Holy Spirit lead the teens, and they're just saying, you know what? I'm just going to get out of the way. It's a difference. A lot of times in ministry, it feels like we are a waiter. We're saying, here, your meal. This is what you should get. That's not what our role needs to be. We are a museum curator. We walk a group around, and when someone stops at a Picasso and says, what's this? I like this. I'm curious about this. We say, let me explain it to you in more detail. That is what our role needs to be. And that's what we're seeing, not needs to be. Let me rephrase that. I don't care. You can do whatever you want. If you don't want to, if you're like, you know what? I don't care, Con. Cool. I don't really care. If you're like, I want to use something else, knock yourself out. I'm just saying that when we start to think about it in this way, I have seen teens or parishes grow from 4 teens to 40 teens in 4 months. And that parish had like a pastor and a bookkeeper. They should never have had a youth minister. The youth minister was a mom who had no experience. But when she did this, when she said, youth group is a place where we ask questions and we find the answers, that's what grew it. Because it started to make the faith matter to teens. And that is what they're trying to look for. They want to find something that matters. They're looking into neuroscience, right? Well, guess what? The church is lined up on pretty much everything. It all makes sense. They want to understand the reason as to why life is the way it is. The church has an answer. That's what we're trying to do. And that is the power of what ministry can be, is a place where, and this works, we have people using our same tools, same framework, same ideas in adult ministry, in youth, in young adults, in middle school, because this rings true. And I'm sure you guys are hearing this and saying, yeah, this is ringing true with me. I wish I had had this. I wish I have this now. I wish I could just go to a place and say, look, man, this is what I'm struggling with, or this is the question I have, and we just try to find the answer. Because that's really what ministry is. And if you're like, but are we teaching them? Well, guess what? Christ only asked questions. He answered a question with an actual definitive answer 3 times in Scripture. Every time else they're like, what about this? And he asked a question back. If we ask questions and we give them the tools to find the answer, they're going to want the faith to be an integral part of their life. That's really what it comes down to. Because our job is not to teach. Our job is to lead them on the journey. Fair enough?